Hello, everybody. Welcome to Inside Story, which is today, starting at 2 o'clock, which is 2 minutes ago. So yay. I just want to welcome everybody to Inside Story, the twice yearly presentation of the stories behind the stories of new books by our local authors and illustrators. Each presenter will have 2 minutes, which is longer than you'd think, to fascinate you with something most people don't know about the books. I'm Dana Sullivan, your host. I'm being helped tremendously by Michele Bacon, Laura Koznovsky, and Julie Arts, kind of behind the scene-ish. Anyway, they're helping me. And thanks so much. Without you, it'd be done. Okay, big shout out to Suzanne Selfors, our local best-selling author, who recently bought Liberty Bay Bookstore in Paulsboro. And she is selling all of our books, and you can go here and click on the Inside Story graphic on their page to get to every single book that was being talked about today, and a whole bunch more, trust me. So we strongly encourage you to take a look at that and buy books. Every book you buy will be signed personally to you by the author and shipped to you. So it's pretty darn cool. There will be 3 book giveaways during our presentation, so stick around for those. You must be present to win. You'll be chosen by a secret random process by Michele Bacon. Only she knows how it really works. I can't even try to explain it to you. I'm quite grateful for you all to be being here today, especially in this time of COVID lockdown and the tragic recent unrest due to the events in Minneapolis. So sad. And I think a lot of us are feeling completely helpless and wondering what we can do. And I know one thing we can do, and that is to promote amazingly good books to our children to help them make this a better world. So that's what we're going to do today. To that end, I also invite you to take a look at the Inside Story page on the SCBWI. SCBWI is Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So our local Western Washington chapters page for the Inside Story has a long list of diverse books written and illustrated by diverse authors and illustrators, and all recommended by today's presenters. So it's a really wonderful list, and I really encourage you and invite you to take a look at that list, read them, spread them, give them to kids, make this world a better place. Thank you, because we need diverse books. Inside Story began in 1998 when Laura McGee Koznovsky, I want you to spell it, there's going to be a test, and George Shannon created a forum where authors and illustrators could celebrate their new titles with local bookstores, librarians, teachers, and other friends of children's books. We're lucky enough to have Laura and George here today. So I will hand it over to them. Take it away, Laura McGee Koznovsky.
Hello. I'm so glad that we're able to gather today. The Inside Story's been going strong for, I think this is since 98, so I should have done the math. This is the 22nd one. Anyway, Laura. I especially want to thank Dana Sullivan for figuring out how to make this still happen despite world economic downturn, COVID, quarantining, and now the protests. It has taken so many hours to navigate the technology and work with all the people to make it happen. And my heart goes out to you, Dana. Thank you so much for all the good work you did to make this happen. George and our intent when we first created it in 1998 was to build this community of people who love children's books. And that includes, remember when you checked in this morning, you had to check if you were a librarian or a children's book author and illustrator or teacher, just a lover of children's books. And I think it really has done that. Of course, it was, when we first did it, we could rub shoulders with each other in the same room, which was a lot of fun too. But this is this is what we can do now. And I'm glad that it still happened despite the challenges. One person who could check all the boxes on that entry registration is George Shannon. He's a wonderful writer. He has the heart of a storyteller, and then the brain of a writer, and then the finger of a librarian. Is that a thing? And I'm sure he sold some books along there somewhere. And so I'm so glad he could be with us today too. From Bainbridge Island, George Shannon.
Well, thank you. And if I get verklempt, it's because everything that's going on, and I've been in isolation alone for a long, long time.
No.
But what I want to, you people have kept this going for 22 years. So today I want you to all think about what it gives you and how you've helped support it, and celebrate all the work you've been doing to keep it going. Just think of all the things that no longer exist that did 22 years ago, like my dark brown hair. Everything's been changing. Many of the bookstores we used to meet at are gone. So there's so much change, but this keeps going, and you are the reason. Another quick thing, last night I began to wonder, now that I'm librarian again, I wish that librarians could access this on their computer when they have free time to learn about the new books that are coming out. Librarians can't get everywhere, so if we could find some way to post this, we'd reach even more people. And I'll end with, when Dana was talking earlier, it made me think of one of my favorite recent picture books called The Rabbit Listened. Find it. It's time to listen. Dana.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Yes, we are recording this, by the way. I forgot to say that. We're recording it, and we will post the link to it later so any librarian anywhere in the whole world can look at it. And we can all forward that to our own friends and spread it around the world. So in a weird way, this is kind of an amazing opportunity. We don't have to fight traffic. We don't have to, well, we might reach so many more. So here, let's fingers crossed, and let's proceed. So we're going to start off with picture books. And our first presenter is the writer-illustrator team. Julie Paschkis is a children's book illustrator and author. She likes to play with words and images. Julie is currently offering free printable coloring pages every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can find them at her website, juliepaschkis.com. Margaret Chodos-rvine comes from a long line of craftspeople. So she approaches her work as if tailoring a suit or cobbling a shoe. It all has to fit and look beautiful at the same time. She has illustrated 13 books for children and has been recognized with starred reviews and other honors, most notably a 2004 Caldecott Honor Award for Ella Sarah Gets Dressed, which she both wrote and illustrated. Here are Julie Paschkis, the author, and Margaret Chodos-rvine, the illustrator of Where Lily Isn't.
Hi, I'm Julie, and welcome to my studio. If you look around, you can see a lot of things. You can see the books, you can see my paints, you can see the tables where I work. You might see my cat, who's trying to take part in this video. But what you won't see is my little dog, Lily. And for many years, she was with me up here, and she was with me everywhere. And then she died, and I was super sad. And in order to help myself understand the loss, I wrote this book called Where Lily Isn't. And it was about all the places where she was missing in my life and in my heart. And it helped me, and I hope that it will help other people, especially children. usually I illustrate my own words, and when it came time to illustrate this book, I found I couldn't do it. I just wasn't able. And then I thought of my friend Margaret Chodos-rvine, and I knew she would be able to do a beautiful job to bring emotional depth without making it either sentimental or maudlin. And she did, and I'm going to turn the video over to her now. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I want to say the first time I heard Julie read her manuscript for Where Lily Isn't, it just really touched me. It made me cry. And I thought it was the perfect book for anybody who has experienced that loss of a beloved pet. And I thought it needed to be a book. So when she asked me if I would be interested in illustrating it, of course I said yes. So to prepare myself, I've drawn a lot of kids from my other books, but I haven't drawn a lot of dogs. So I gave myself an assignment of drawing 100 lilies. So here's some of the 100 lilies that I drew from one of my sketchbooks. So the book is about Lily, but a large part of the book is about the absence of Lily. And it starts out a little bit sad, but it ends on a happy note. So Julie and I both hope that this book will help anybody who's missing a beloved pet. So thank you from both of us.
Thank you. Thank you. That is tough dealing with the loss of a pet. So how sweet. Next up, Anait Semirdzhyan grew up in a multicultural family and lived in several countries with diverse cultures before settling in the Seattle area with her husband and twin daughters. She studied economics, but art has been her true path since she was a child, and now she happily dedicates herself to children's book illustration. When not drawing, you can find her exploring the neighborhoods with her four-legged furry friend or experimenting with new recipes for the family dinner. Anait Semirdzhyan, illustrator, The Arabic Quilt, An Immigrant Story. Take it away.
Thank you, Dana. Hi, everyone. I'm Anait Semirdzhyan, and I am an illustrator of The Arabic Quilt, An Immigrant Story by Aya Khalil. This story based on true life events happened to the author when she immigrated to the US with her family as a kid. Being an immigrant myself, I was really excited and honored to illustrate this story. When I was a kid, I changed many schools because of my family frequent moving. So while illustrating Kanzi, this is Kanzi, in her first day of school, I went through my own memories. And I think this book with happy ending story and the big role of teacher can be helpful for any kid struggling to fit in. So the illustrations for this book I made in ink watercolor with a little bit editing in Photoshop. I had fun exploring the Arabic culture, and I tried to use traditional elements in the illustrations. So also this book received its star review from School Library Journal and continues getting good feedback from the readers. So please check it out, and I hope you like it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anait. Thank you. That was great. She asked me earlier, what if I can't talk for a whole 2 minutes? I said, well, you'll be fine. Ellie Peterson is a picture book author, illustrator, and science educator living in the Seattle area. Her work is inspired by her experience teaching STEM, S-T-E-M, her upbringing as a biracial Army brat, and her adventures in parenting. Ellie's books actively encourage children to question how they know what they know. When she's not in the lab, she enjoys experimenting with art supplies in her home studio and visiting schools across the state. Take it away, Ellie Peterson, author and illustrator of The Reason for the Seasons.
Hi, everyone. I am Ellie and the author of The Reason for the Seasons, which is the second book in the Julia Copernicus series. The first is It's a Round, Round World, which I shared Inside Story last fall. Back when my publisher, Boyd's Mills and Kane, asked for my ideas about a second book, I knew I wanted it to be about the seasons. As Dana mentioned, in my other life, I'm a 6th grade science teacher, and I know this is probably the most misunderstood phenomenon in primary and middle school science. Some of you who are educators may remember a documentary that came out in the early 90s called A Private Universe, which sought to expose these misconceptions. What I learned then and what I've experienced with students in my own classroom laid the foundation for this book. And what you'll find is that instead of just telling kids what causes the season, the book actually starts by eliciting the reader's preconceived notions, asking them questions, and then guiding them to an understanding of why that doesn't work, just like a teacher might do in a classroom. So for example, most kids and even adults think that the seasons are caused by Earth's proximity to the sun, right? And it makes sense because when we're closer to a source of heat, we feel warmer. And it would seem like that should correlate with the summer, right? But that would also mean that people who are living in the northern hemisphere experience the same season at the same time as people living in the southern hemisphere. And we know that doesn't happen. They have opposite seasons, like shown here. I like Grandma here in her bikini. She's really bold. You can actually look up pictures of people celebrating New Year's Eve, for instance, in Sydney, Australia versus New York City. And you'll see one group is wearing flip-flops and shorts and the other people are dressed for a blizzard. So that's how it begins. But if you want to know how it ends and what really does cause the seasons, you'll have to get the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. I have, by the way, visited Ellie's class. She is a great teacher and she wears flip-flops and bikinis. Not really. Jennifer K. Mann hails from Bainbridge Island. She is a picture book author and illustrator who was once an architect. Jennifer loves to go car camping with her family and has done so every summer for the last 17 years. Her newest picture book, The Camping Trip, was inspired by those summer camping experiences. Take it away, Jennifer K. Mann, author and illustrator of The Camping Trip.
Hello, everybody. Yes, here is The Camping Trip. This book was just published by Candlewick in this month of May, and it is a hybrid picture book graphic novel. And yes, inspired by my many, many summers of camping. But instead of telling you about camping, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I made the art for this book. This book I made on a very short timeline because although I sold it as a picture book, a 32-page picture book, it quickly turned into a 54-page picture book graphic novel hybrid, which meant I had to find a way to do hundreds of images extremely quickly. And I really didn't know what I was going to do with this. So once I had my sketches worked out, I started with 3, when I was getting ready to do the final art, I started with 3 of the more distinct images in the book to kind of establish my path. And I started with this, the map, this is the forest scene in the middle, and then a spread that included frames. And once I figured out how I was going to do those, I was able to do the rest of the book. The images are created digitally, although all of the drawings are done by hand. I sketch on tracing paper. I scan those in. I combine them with collage material that I also scanned in, including wrapping paper, the insides of envelopes, you know, those security envelopes. I used old monotypes from my days as a printmaker, and then digital paint. And I put them all together in Photoshop in an extraordinarily short period of time. And fortunately, it all did hold together in the end, although I didn't have a specific plan for it. I keep on my desk when I'm working a stack of books that inspire me. These are sort of my mentors. I'll just show you quickly what those books are. This is On a Magical Do-Nothing Day by Isabel Allende. A very old book by John Birmingham called Seasons. There are a few people in here who might remember this from way back when. And then Jane, the Fox and Me, which is written by Franny Britt and illustrated by Isabel Arsenault. These were my book mentors as I was working. And that's it. That's the story of The Camping Trip.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer was an architect, so she taught me the term mid-century modern. when she told me that's what I am. Anyway, Kerri Kokias first learned about clever hands while clever haunts, while getting her undergraduate degree in psychology. His story captured her heart, mind, and imagination. She hopes it will capture yours too. Kerri lives in Burien, Washington with her family. She is also the author of Snow Sisters, illustrated by Tegan White. Kerri Kokias, take it away, author of Clever Hands, the true story of the counting, adding, and time-telling horse.
Yes, this is my most recent picture book and my first nonfiction picture book. And like Dana said, I first learned about Clever Hans in my Psych 101 class back in college. And Hans was a horse who lived in Germany in the early 1900s. And he caused a fair amount of controversy because he seemed to be able to count and tell time and solve math problems and read and spell and more. And so his story had stuck with me over the years. And when I began writing for children and I was brainstorming ideas for possible nonfiction picture books, he immediately came to mind, and I knew that I wanted to share his story. Just the idea of a horse that could do all these things that kids were going to school to learn to do themselves, have the obvious kid appeal, and I knew there was a good hook there. And I also knew that Hans's story ended in a way that he had a lasting scientific impact. So I knew that the story would naturally have a satisfying ending. And it seemed like I wouldn't have to do anything. The story would just write itself. So the challenge ended up being in doing the research for the middle. There was a big scientific investigation into how Hans learned to do the things that he could do. So I ordered the original research report, which was written in 1911 and translated from German. And I spent a lot of time reading and rereading and kind of generally slogging through those like almost 300 pages. And they were pretty dry. And I also dug up a bunch of old newspaper articles on Hans, and they were super fun and often included pictures. And it turned out that I got lucky, and there was a strong element of mystery just throughout. Well, there naturally is a strong element of mystery in the scientific method itself. And because Hans continued to stump scientists, I was able to kind of play up that mystery in his story. And then the book was illustrated by Mike Lowry, which is in this comic style that turned out super fun. And I loved how he made Hans so expressive. A lot of the story takes place in the same setting, so I was curious how an illustrator would kind of make it fun. And he did it. And so like here's its expression of how proud he was when he's kind of showing what he knows about music. And another one of my favorite pages is this one. He's talking about how he was a hard worker, but he sometimes got tired of the constant questioning. And in reality, he sometimes would kick his owner. But then he liked the bread and carrots and sugar cubes that he received as treats. And there's a happy Hans getting his treats. And so, yeah, so it was a fun story to work on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Don't you just love books that write themselves?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say this was one of the first manuscripts I wrote, so it was like 15 years ago. So it's not exactly like it was an easy process, but it happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish they'd write themselves and publish themselves too. Well, anyway, thank you very much. Let's move on to Kjersten Hayes, who lives in Bellingham, Washington, in a century-old house full of color, books, pottery, art, music, and happy kid noises. She has spent many years creating and selling collage work, greeting cards, and handmade journals. She loves adventure, crafting, and teaching art classes for kids. Let's hear from Kjersten Hayes, author of The Elephant's Guide to Hide and Seek.
Hi. So here it is, The Elephant's Guide to Hide and Seek. It's my first picture book. So when my son Oscar was small, we lived in Malaysia for a few years. And at one point we flew home to the Northwest and we're driving up from SeaTac to Bellingham on I-5. And my son, who was 4 at the time, pointed out the window and said, "Hey, Mommy, look, the forest, that's where the elephants live," because that's where they live in Malaysia. And I thought it was cute, so I wrote the memory down. And then a few years later, I had this picture book idea to make a parody guidebook of some kind for kids. I had brainstormed various options for it, including hide and seek. But looking for further inspiration, I was looking through my old journals and stumbled on the memory I just mentioned. And that's when the idea as a whole really clicked. I pictured an elephant in the woods, and I thought about making a guide for him because he'd be lousy at hide and seek because of his size, which ended up being perfect for me because it ended up being about an awkward character who is participating in a game he's utterly unsure about, which was pretty much my entire childhood experience with sports. For example, I have a very clear memory of desperately wanting to join the kids playing basketball at recess at my new school one time when I moved as a kid, but instead, for months, I leaned against the wall and just watched and never joined in. So in a way, this book for me was writing to fix wrongs of my past, rewriting the ending. I made a book about a character who's afraid and awkward, but gets in the game anyway. So that's the backstory for The Elephant's Guide to Hide and Seek. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that. That's great. I love that we can rewrite our own histories. And I know I have plenty of times. Moving on to Karen Robbins, who is an award-winning children's author and has been a member of the SCBWI for 35 years. She specializes in the young child, creating board books, novelties, picture books, and early readers. Karen is a right brain creative, book and toy designer living in Gig Harbor. She grew up in a patriotic family and loves America. She wrote America's Flag Story for Children to Love Our Country and Flag. She is also the co-author of Flags Across America for adults in the popular Think series. Let's hear from Karen Robbins, author of America's Flag Story.
Thank you so much. You would probably wonder why I would write 3 patriotic books for the world, and it's because I grew up in a very patriotic family, and I was taught to love God and country, and so it's always been a part of my core, with my older brother being a captain in the Marine Corps in Vietnam, and then losing a wonderful Marine summer boyfriend in the Vietnam War. So I want, as an educator, I think it's really our responsibility to teach children to love our flag. It is the symbol of our country, and it's important as educators and parents to make sure that children honor and respect our flag. You can see that here's the cover. Oh, can you see it here? It's beautifully illustrated by Jeff James. And Jeff was a part of our Society of Children Book Writers group in Seattle, but now lives on the East Coast. But I was thrilled when he said yes. He loved the manuscript and he wanted to be my illustrator. It was just wonderful because, as we know, picture books, I mean, the illustrations really sell a picture book. And Jeff is a realist illustrator, and I don't think there are many realist illustrators in the world. I'll show you a few of his pictures. This was a pretty serious book, and so we couldn't use any, light illustrations or cartoon illustrations. Jeff did a magnificent job. I had a gentleman looking at the book and loved it, and he said, "Oh, the photographs are simply beautiful." And no, these are not photographs. This is illustrations by J. James, and I'm so grateful. The book will be wonderful for young children in elementary schools and in homeschools, and will cover the whole history of the American flag in just 32 pages. There's activities in the back of the book too that teach everyone how to fold the flag correctly and to follow flag etiquette. You must know the etiquette so you can follow it. And then also there's a way that you can learn to cut a 5-pointed star in one snip. And the directions are just in the back of the book. So I hope that you'll take and enjoy America's flag story. Our country really needs this right now, forever. Thanks so much.
Hi, Michele Bacon here with your prize. The first prize winner, chosen randomly, is Nina Weinstein. So Nina, if you go to libertybaybooks.com and select any of the books that you have heard about here today, you'll receive that book for free. Again, libertybaybooks.com. I will send your name to Liberty Bay after this meeting, and then you can write in and choose your book. Congratulations.
Thank you, Book Fairy Michele. She's our book fairy. And by the way, you all, let's face it, you're all winners. We can all go to libertybay.books.com and talk to Suzanne Selfors and order any book we want. But we really want books from today. By the way, there are 109 people tuned in today, so that's really cool. Usually we get about 50, and so this is more. I'm not good at math, but I know that's more. Moving on, some more picture books. Elizabeth Rose Stanton used to be an architect, so we're kind of heavy on architects here. But how come they're not keeping their people? Anyway, Elizabeth Rose Stanton used to be an architect, but now builds picture books. Her favorite characters are farm animals, monsters, and ghosts. Not goats, ghosts. She lives in Seattle with her husband and a pair of Scottish fold cats. Elizabeth Rose Stanton, author, illustrator of Cowie.
Hi, everybody, and thank you all for being here. Well, guys, I had a whole 2 minutes figured out about how I was going to tell you all about Cowie and how he actually started out as a little cow, but ended up being a donkey who tries to be a cow and gets help from his friends and all that good picture book stuff. But you know, the real inside story, and maybe why you haven't heard too much about Cowie, is that right after Cowie was released by Simon & Schuster in January, I had a little adventure in that I slipped on a patch of Northwest slimy sidewalk and ended up on my donkey. You know that other word for donkey. And I had to have an operation to fix it. And because of it, I couldn't sit on my donkey or even stand up for very long until very recently. So Cowie never really got off the ground because I couldn't get off the ground. So I'm very, very excited for this to be Cowie's first real public appearance. It's almost like a little book launch. So I'm not going to say too much more here about Cowie other than it is a silly picture book with a donkey and a duck and a mouse and even a little chick. And there's a lot of wordplay in Cowie that I think will be fun and maybe even a little challenging for kids. And there are also an awful lot of cows in Cowie. So if you like cows, you're all set. So, you know, I hope you'll feel a little sorry for Cowie and maybe buy the book. And if you do, I will sign a book plate. You will get a little bag of swag. You'll even get a cowbell. So thanks everybody, and stay safe, wear your masks, and watch out for slimy sidewalks because you don't want to end up on your your donkey. I mean, you know, that part that sounds like donkey. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't want to fall on your donkey. Next up is Amanda Obler, who grew up in New Hampshire, where she developed a love for snow, being on the water, and maple syrup. In college, she studied biology and continues to love all things science to this day. She enjoys writing nonfiction because of all the interesting things she gets to learn and the people she gets to meet. Amanda Obler authored The Spirit of Springer, the real-life rescue of an orphaned orca. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Amanda, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about my book, The Spirit of Springer, the real-life rescue of an orphaned orca. And there's one really cool thing that I'm happy to share with you that I couldn't actually put in the book. Now, everybody knows that when a human baby is born, it doesn't know how to talk, and it learns to talk by listening to the words that its parent says. And an orca calf learns the calls of its pod the same way by listening to the calls that its mother makes and imitating those calls. Now, when the orca in my book was found swimming all by herself in the Puget Sound, nobody knew who she was. So people made recordings of her calls, and they sent it out to all the whale researchers in the area, and everybody agreed that this baby orca was from one of the apods that swims up near Vancouver, Canada. But there was one whale researcher named Helena Simmons, and she works at the Orca Lab up near Vancouver. And when she heard the calls, she said, I know exactly who that baby is. That orca baby is Springer, the baby of Sutlej. And she knew that because she heard Springer make a unique call that she had only ever heard from Sutlej, and the only orca that would learn Sutlej's special call would be her baby. Now, I'm going to play those calls right now. I have a helper, and the first recording is of Sutlej in 1988 when she was swimming near the Orca Lab, and then the second call is of Springer when she was found swimming all by herself in the Puget Sound 14 years later. Okay, go ahead. Here comes Sutlej, the mom. And press play right there. Here comes the baby. One more time. Mom. Baby. Anyway, I just love that orca baby voice. I hope you could hear it. And thanks for talking with me about orcas and my book, The Spirit of Springer.
That is so cool. I've never heard an orca like that before. You should know that if you do buy The Spirit of Springer, you will get a baby orca sent to you by Suzanne Selfridge. Moving on, Rebecca Van Slyke is the author of Lexi the Word Wrangler, Lana Lynn Howls at the Moon, Where Do Pants Go, and other picture books. She's also a second grade teacher. She has an MFA in writing for children and young adults from the Vermont College of Fine Arts. Rebecca lives in Linden, Washington with her husband and two spoiled miniature dachshunds. Let's hear it from Rebecca Van Slyke, author of Monsters Trucks.
Hi, welcome everyone. This is the book Monsters Trucks, and its book birthday was March 3rd, right before all this COVID stuff went down. But if you saw this book when it first started, it looked very, very differently. In fact, this book has had 9 revisions. It started out as a book called Dump Truck Dump, about a little dump truck that went from building site to building site, dumping off a load, getting a new load, and taking it all around. And during this day, at the end of the day, the book would pan out and you would find out that this little dump truck was actually a toy dump truck owned by a child in their backyard. And I thought this was so clever. So I sent it to my agent, and my agent said, you know, it's not really that clever. So she said, try again. So I did. And I had a rhyming version. I had a version where animals were sneaking onto a job site, a logging site, and after the loggers went home. I had a version where the trucks were actually dinosaurs. I had a version where raccoons were playing on a job site after the workers went home. Finally, I had a version called Team Truck where there were 10 different construction vehicles, and the child reader would push buttons to help them do something. And my agent said, you know, you're getting closer, but it needs more story. And that's where Monster came in. And Monster was originally talking right to the child reader. She said, my agent said, you know, it's a little bit Muppety. So I had a narrator come in, and the narrator was finally the thing that helped us hold the whole story together. My agent sent it out, and after about a year, Bloomsbury bought it, and Joe Sutphin is the illustrator. I think he did a marvelous job. My takeaway from this is that if you have a project that doesn't seem to be working, don't give up. You can try new things. Don't be afraid to give it a whole new look. And during that time, you can put it down, but work on other projects. And one day something may click. So keep building, and Monster would be very proud of you. Thank you.
I happen to know that Rebecca knows trucks. She's got her own tractor. Yep. She wouldn't let me drive it, but she has one. Moving on to Sarah Jane Marsh, who is the author of Most Wanted, the Revolutionary Partnership of John Hancock and Samuel Adams, recipient of a Kirkus Star. Kirkus is really cranky, and so when you get a star from Kirkus, it's really great. Her previous book, Thomas Paine and the Dangerous Word, was a 2019 Teacher's Choice by the International Literary Association and a National Council of the Social Studies Notable Book of 2019. Like Thomas Paine, Sarah believes in lifelong learning. She works in community organizing around trauma-informed restorative practices for youth and family crisis prevention. Let's hear from Sarah Jane Marsh, author of Most Wanted, the Revolutionary Partnership of John Hancock and Samuel Adams.
Well, let's talk about revolution. Writing Most Wanted was an awakening for me personally as a citizen and also professionally as an author who tells our nation's history to children. And our history is uncomfortable, and clearly it surrounds us still. We have a scene in Most Wanted that is protests against the Stamp Act. And when early illustrations came in, I wrote my editor and said, "Do you think this looks too much like Charlottesville? Is this problematic or spot on?" So as I was wrestling with questions like this, I was listening and reading and learning from the courageous and deeply knowledgeable, diverse voices that were urging people like me to do better. I traveled to Pennsylvania and went to the Highlights Foundation's first ever cultural competency workshop with Dr. Debbie Reese, Dr. Laura Jimenez, librarian Edie Campbell, and others. And among many things, I learned that history is not neutral, and that white history has been the history of the United States, silencing other voices. And I reflected that my resources, my research for Most Wanted, all except for 2 were written by white men. And I had to think about my own complicity in perpetuating that white narrative. And so these are struggles that I talk about in my author's note. But today, we're here because we believe in the power of stories in children's lives. And as Americans, we pledge liberty and justice for all. We have so much work to do, and stories can be a powerful force in that journey. So thank you. Most Wanted, originally by Disney Hyperion, now published by Little & Brown. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was great. And what a wonderful message for today, particularly. Moving on to Laurie Ann Thompson, who writes for young people to help them understand the world we live in so they can make it a better place for all. I'm sensing a theme here. She is co-author of the Two Truths and a Lie series and author of other award-winning nonfiction books for kids and teens, including Be a Changemaker and Emmanuel's Dream, the true story of Emmanuel Ofosu Yeboah, a picture book biography that received the Schneider Family Book Award and was named an ALA Notable and CCBC Choice. Learn more at lauriethompson.com. Let's now learn from Laurie Ann Thompson, author of Elizabeth Warren's Big, Bold Plans.
Hey everyone. If you'd asked me this time last year what I'd be presenting at Inside Story, I would have said nothing because I did not think that I had a book coming out in 2020. So this project was a huge surprise. It kind of fell in my lap, which doesn't normally happen in this business, but I'm really glad that it did. And the interesting thing about it is that when it did, it came with a very short deadline. So I had to write really, really quickly, which is not the way I usually do things. So there were a lot of surprises with this book, but the biggest one came about because of this page right here, the third spread in the book. And it reads in part, "It was a cold, gray Sunday evening. Elizabeth's daddy came in from working outside. She was struck by his stillness, his shaking hands, his splotchy skin. "We're going to the hospital," her mother told her. "You stay here." With only her little dog Missy to comfort her, Elizabeth waited and worried. That's obviously a key scene in the book, a pivotal scene, but we had no idea what Missy looked like. Everything I researched, I dug and dug, and I could not figure out what Missy looked like. So we took a chance and we reached out to Elizabeth herself in the middle of the campaign when everything was super busy and she had so many demands on her time. And we said, we just have to know, what kind of dog is Missy? And we really didn't expect to get an answer. Lo and behold, the very next day, we got a full-length email back from Elizabeth Warren herself, telling us what kind of dog Missy was. She was a Pekingese, but a little bit browner and a little bit scruffier. She even included a picture from iStock Photo showing us that the dog looked kind of like this. And so that's just really special that we have that email in the middle of all the crazy busyness. And we're so happy to know what Missy looked like that she ends up on the back cover, as well as on the title page, which was super cool. And yeah, so this book came with a whole lot of surprises. And I really love, we got a review from School Library Journal that said, readers are left with the feeling that improving the lives of others is the real goal, and running for president is just one path to incite change. And I'm really happy that they picked up on that, because that is exactly what I'm going for here. I think that no matter where your politics lie, it's really important to think about how we can all pull together to make the world a better place. So that is my inside story for Elizabeth Warren's Big Bold Plans.
Thank you, Laurie. Big and bold. I think you'd agree that every book is made better if you put a dog in it. So I'm glad you got the dog right. Falth Pray is an author illustrator who regularly wrangles 4 kids and 2 cats. Cats are good too, Faith. She is excited about books, rainstorms, kids, and sharing kindness. When a stroke left this young mother struggling to find herself as a writer again, she started making art. Her wand of choice is pencil and watercolor with a sprinkling of digital magic on top. Let's hear from Falth Pray, illustrator of Once Upon a Timely.
Hi, thanks for having me here, Dana and everybody. This is the book I got to illustrate. It's by Lynn Parrish Sutton, published by Kane Miller Books, and it's called Once Upon a Timely. And Kane Miller approached me and asked me to consider doing an illustration project of a book about fairy tale characters, but to reimagine them as people from diverse cultures and ethnicities and people that would more represent our world. And I was thrilled with that, because that is what our world is about, right? So I gotta rethink fairy godmothers and Red Riding Hood and all different kinds of characters that might be familiar, but with different settings. And it was a really fun project to work on. And something I got to do for Kane Miller also is I made a printable that you can go onto the Kane Miller website and print your own. We've been doing this is, I was going to say, sorry, this is a good book for like really young readers. It's kind of a hybrid between a board book and a picture book. It is a picture book, but the pages are nice and sturdy. So I found that this has been a must read for like a baby shower gifts. And then I made printable puppets that you can go onto the website at Kane Miller and print and cut out and create your own characters and have, it's sort of a fun story time for like preschool groups. And then I also wanted to tell you that my book, The Star Keeper, that I wrote and illustrated, is coming out next week with the Random House Books.
Thank you very much, Faith. I have chewed on that book, and they really are sturdy pages. So thank you, Faith. Moving on to Brianna Caplan Sayres, who would love to spend Passover in outer space, but for now she enjoys celebrating Seder with her husband and their 2 future astronauts in her hometown of Seattle, Washington. Brianna is the author of picture books, including the Where Do Diggers Sleep at Night series, illustrated by Christian Slade, and Night Night Curiosity, illustrated by Ryan O'Rourke. Let's hear from Brianna, Caplan Sayres, author of Asteroid Goldberg, Passover in Outer Space. Take it away.
Hi all. As an author, it's always interesting to me that I write books and then sometimes reviewers or other people will tell me the messages in my books and they'll be like, sure that I put that message in, but it's never a message I really thought of. And I love it. It's so exciting. And the other day I was talking to somebody about my newest picture book that I'm going to talk to you about today, Asteroid Goldberg, Passover in Outer Space. And for me, this is an out-of-this-world fantasy about Asteroid Goldberg and her family. Asteroid gets stuck her family gets stuck in outer space for Passover. And she's a very creative problem solver. And Jupiter's moons become her matzo balls. The Big Dipper becomes her ladle. And she just really is this wonderful creative problem solver. But somebody was talking to me about my book. And she said to me, you know, it's really interesting how it's so current with the current situation with COVID. And I was like, that's interesting. What message did she see in my book? And of course, Asteroid and her family are stuck in a rocket ship and they're stuck not being able to celebrate the holiday. And they're stuck in a very small space like we all are right now. And they're trying to do things, they have to do things in a new way. And it becomes a book about how do you celebrate a holiday when stuck in a rocket ship? And we're all trying to do that right now and coming up with creative ways to do things like our Zoom stay inside story and all these new ways we're inventing. And so I love that she saw how this book is actually about what we're trying to do with our creative problem solving right now. And while I'm in this rocket ship with you, I also did want to share with you another book because in addition to being an author, recently I've taken on a new role for me as an editor. And I'm very proud of this book, Such a Library, a Yiddish Folktale Reimagined by Jill Ross Nadler and illustrated by Esther Vandenberg. And this is an old Yiddish folktale in a modern day library with a magical librarian named Misunderstood. And thank you to all you magical librarians out there today and out there because we're so excited. And if you look at this book, please make sure to look at all the amazing things that are hidden in the illustrations because they're incredible, including a rabbi on a flying trapeze. And since we did talk about dogs in books, this one has a robot dog that I'm very excited about. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Brianna. I like robot dogs too. They're great, especially ones that come to Seder. So yay. Now we're moving on to, and I second that. Yay, librarians, all of you librarians out there. I'm so glad you tuned in and are checking this out. You're the defenders of our Constitution and we love you. Plus you teach us to read. We're moving on to early readers now, of which we have one, and it is written by Dori Hillestad Butler, who is the author of more than 50 books for young readers, including the 2-time Geisel Honor Award-winning King and Kayla series, Edgar Award-winning Buddy Files series, the Haunted Library series, and the brand new Dear Beast series. Her books have been named to ALSC Notable, CCBC Choice, Bank Street College Best Book of the Year, Junior Library Guild, Chicago Public Library Best Fiction for Younger Readers, and other awards lists. Are there others? She lives in Kirkland. Let's now hear from Dori Hillestad Butler, author of King and Kayla and the Case of the Unhappy Neighbor.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks for being here, everyone. King and Kayla and the Case of the Unhappy Neighbor is the 6th book in the series. This is King and this is Kayla. And the unhappy neighbor is Mr. Gary. He looks like this. And what he's unhappy about is that someone has messed up his pristine yard. He's pretty sure that King's friend Thor did it, but King knows that Thor is innocent and he sets out to prove it. I named Mr. Gary after a swimming teacher I had as a kid who pulled me under the water when I was scared to put my face in the water, and I still don't swim because of him. Nancy Myers, who illustrates the series, told me she modeled him after a guy in her neighborhood who glares at anybody who walks by with a dog. So together we sort of got collective revenge there. My editor says this is her favorite book in the series because there's an extra layer of investigation in this one. She may or may not be talking about this last piece of evidence that readers can use to match with a scat chart in the back of the book to find out who really messed up Mr. Gary's yard.
This is Michele Bacon here with another prize. This time, our random prize winner is Bong Yun Shin. Bong Yun Shin. If you go to libertybaybooks.com, you may order your favorite of all the books you've heard about today, and we will let them know that you are a winner. So your book will be free. Of course, you can buy others while you're there.
Kevan Atteberry is now joining Dori on our next book. We're now in the chapter book section, of which there is one book. So Kevan Atteberry is joining Dori on our next book, Dear Beast. Kevan is a writer, illustrator of award-winning children's books, including Bunnies, that's got 3 exclamation points, Puddles, also 3, I Love You More Than the Smell of Swamp Gas, and Ghost Cat. Among books he has illustrated for others are Halloween Hustle by Charlotte Gunnifson, Tickle Monster by Josie Bizet, and Frankie Stein by Lola Schaefer. But Kevin's biggest claim to fame may be creating Clippy the Paperclip, the Microsoft Word helper, annoying hundreds of millions of people daily at one point. Let's hear from Dori Hillestad, Butler, and Kevan Atteberry, illustrator of Dear Beast.
So Dear Beast is an epistolary series, which means it's written in the form of letters, and it's about a cat and dog who learn to share a boy who goes back and forth between them and his recently divorced parents. The idea for this project began when Andy, my 23-year-old, adopted a cat named Simon. The first time Andy came over after he adopted this cat, our dog Mouse, who I can maybe show you, there's Mouse, went absolutely nuts. He clearly smelled Simon on Andy, and he just kept circling him like, what did you do? Did you get a cat? And I started to imagine what Mouse might say to Andy's cat if he could talk or write a letter. And then I realized that could be a book. By the way, Andy got his cat from Kevan Atteberry. And look who illustrated the book. Coincidence? I think not. So Kevan, you can take it away.
Well, when I was asked to, if I'd be interested in illustrating a book for Dori Hillestad Butler, I was thrilled and agreed immediately. I mean, who wouldn't? She is a terrific and hilarious writer and very successful. I'd never illustrated a chapter book before and welcomed the opportunity. When I got the manuscript, I knew I made a wise and not too difficult of a decision. It was filled with some very interesting characters. Their personalities came out in the wonderful text by Dori. And it was mostly easy coming up with what they looked like. I had a little trouble with Baxter the dog because of a misunderstanding or a miscommunication about what species he was supposed to be. When we finally decided he was a total mutt, he came together quickly and easily. The cat, Simon, was pretty easy, having owned the original Simon before, even if it was only for a week or so. But my favorite character was the mail carrier, a snail, as you can see here. And I've been asked about his bushy mustache and whether it was inspired by former ex-National Security Advisor John Bolton, and I tell folks, no, don't be silly. It was inspired by Cliff Clavin, the postman character from the TV series Cheers. It was fun to create all these characters and to create some new ones in book 2 that comes out next year. And I've just received the manuscript for book 3 and I'm loving it, plus more new characters. Done, Laura.
Boy, that works. Okay, that's Laura.
I actually couldn't see you for the countdown.
Oh, well. Well, thank you, Kevin. And I'm glad you watched Cheers as a young man. We're now in the middle grade section. And so Kim Baker is going to lead us off. Her first middle grade novel, Pickle, has been selected for many reading lists and was a CBC Children's Choice Awards Book of the Year finalist and an SCBWI Crystal Kite winner. And there's Laura again. Smile, Laura. Hello. I'm not sure why that keeps happening. So do you just pretend to talk and I'll do the voice. When she was 13, we're back to Kim, she lived above an old theater and drove a rusty VW van to odd jobs. There you go. She now lives in Seattle near tide pools, but usually far from bears. Kim Baker, author of The Water Bears.
Thank you for zooming in, everybody, and thank you for having me. On school visits, I ask the kids what they think would be the good characteristics that would make somebody a good writer. And they say answers like good grammar, imagination, loving reading. Some wise ones say patience. And those are all true, but I think the main thing you need is curiosity. And every story I've ever written starts with a what if question. It is not easy to write a story right now in these times, these last few years. So I try and focus on what I love about the world and what young me loved about the world. And when I was middle grade age, 12, 13, 14, going into 14, I was a total rocker and I loved music. And I drove a car. We were really poor, and I drove my mom's old VW van to work because I had a job at that age too. And I thought, what if I wrote a story about a rocker kid? And I had him, the character in this book, find a guitar on the beach, which was somehow magical, and it had barnacles on it and stuff that they could still play. But I'm not a musician. I have musicians in my family. I'm actually in their music room right now for the Wi-Fi, but I don't play music, so that story didn't really work. But it had other stuff that I loved about the world. It had magic and science and marine biology and shaggy dogs and goats, which I got to research and go to goat farms, and vaudeville, which I researched, and abstract things too, like creative communities like the SCBWI, resilience, hope. And I was planning my next story, which had tardigrades in it, water bears, which are these alien microbes about the size of salt. And they are around us and they can survive anything, being frozen, going to outer space. And I was like building the story, this next story about them. So I thought about power chord night and day, the way that writers do about their story. And I realized pretty late in the process that I was already writing the tardigrade story. It had water, it had bears, it had adaptation and survival, and power chord became the water bears, and here it is. And it's out now from Wendy Lamb Books, Random House, and I found out this week that it's on the Washington Post Summer Book Club for kids. So I hope you enjoy it, and thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Yay, water bears. I just read it. It's full of bears and water and tarted, those guys, those little guys. Sarah Caplan writes fiction for children. Her debut novel, Get a Grip, Vivi Cohen, was released by Dial Books for young readers in February. The book has received starred reviews from Kirkus, SLJ, and Booklist. In her previous life, Sarah earned a PhD in history from the University of California, Los Angeles. She is active in the neurodiversity movement, serving as chairperson of the Association for Autistic Community. Let's hear from Sarah Caplan, author of Get a Grip, Vivi Cohen.
Hi, thank you. So like I said, Get a Grip, Vivi Cohen is my first book. It came out from Penguin about a month before the pandemic got really bad. So it's been an experience, but I'm glad to be here today to tell you a little bit about it. So Get a Grip, Vivi Cohen is about Vivi Cohen, an 11-year-old autistic girl. And one thing about her is that she absolutely adores baseball. She wants nothing more than to be a knuckleball pitcher, just like her favorite MLB player, VJ Caplan, that is. And so she writes him a letter for her social skills group, telling him all about her dreams of being a baseball player. And around the same time, two things happen. First, while Vivi's playing at the park with her brother, a Little League coach spots her and recruits her for a real team for the first time. And second, around the same time, VJ writes back to her. And so she has a Major League Baseball player as a pen pal, And the entire story is told entirely through their letters back and forth. It's an epistolary novel. So that's the book, and I'm really proud of what I've done, and I like to think, I think if you like baseball, you will definitely like this book, but I like to tell people that it's not just a story about baseball. My editor doesn't like baseball, actually, and so I think that it's really, it's not just about baseball, it's not just about disability, but it's really a story about one girl's kind of attempt to kind of find herself. And I'll just read a little bit from the book list review because I think it kind of captures it. A clear, authentic, and universally relatable representation of autism while telling a positive, upbeat, feel-good story about a girl's fight to play the game she loves. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and congratulations on your debut novel. I think I liked what Brianna had to say earlier about how other people can sometimes come up with ideas about what your book is about. So regardless of what you think it's about, you're going to hear from others who think it's about something completely different, and good luck to that. Vikram Madan wanted to be a cartoonist, but ended up an engineer. And Vikram, you forgot to say you're also a badass guitar player. Thankfully, he came to his senses and now makes whimsical paintings and writes and illustrates funny poems. His poetry books include A Hat Full of Dragons, which received a starred review from Kokias, and The Bubble Collector and Lord of the Bubbles, both of which won Moonbeam Awards for children's poetry. Let's hear from Vikram Madan, author, illustrator of A Hat Full of Dragons and more than 13.8 billion other funny poems. Take it away, Vikram.
Right. Hi, everybody. I'm Vikram Madan, and this is my book. It's called A Hat Full of Dragons, and more than 13.8 billion, and that's billion with a B. And it doesn't look it, but there's plenty of poems in here. I had a lot of fun writing this book. So as Dana introduced me, I grew up in India. I've been writing poems and I've been doodling since I was 8 years old. And but growing up in India, I just ended up an engineer like everybody else. And then one day I was sitting in my office writing code, and instead of writing code, I found myself writing a poem. And I realized, you know, I might be on the wrong track here. So a couple of years ago, I just quit my job, cold turkey, went to an art school, learned how to paint. You can see all my paintings behind me, and then started writing poetry seriously. And I self-published this book called The Bubble Collector. And I self-published it because poetry is kind of hard to publish. But then it went on to win an award, and I was like, okay, maybe I might be onto something. So I did a second one called Lord of the Bubbles. And then I started doing school visits and author visits, and kids seemed to really relate to my poetry. And one of the things kids always ask me is, how are you writing these poems? So here's a quick demonstration. You take some words, just have fun with them, you know, smoosh them around, put them in your, take some magic from your head, and then pull out basically poetry. How's that? So I had a lot of fun doing this book. It's illustrated by me. I'll give you a quick flip through. A lot of illustrations, a lot of poetic styles, a lot of silliness. I got a star review from Kokias. They called it silly and loopy and meta and interactive, and then put it on their weekly podcast where the editors just kept calling it really, really fun. So check out the book. It's really fun. And if you do get the book, I will be happy to send you a book plate, and hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you. And just a little quick reminder, libertybaybooks.com. I'll hold it really still. libertybaybooks.com. Go there, click on this link right on their homepage, and you can check out any of these books that you've been hearing about and others that are yet to come. Speaking of which, Trudy Truitt. Is that the name of a children's author or not? Trudy Truitt is a former TV news reporter and weather forecaster who had so much fun talking to students about meteorology, she decided to write a weather book for them. More than 100 fiction. Yeah, that's not a typo. More than 100 fiction and nonfiction titles later, she is still at it. Her latest venture is Explorer Academy, a science fact-based action adventure series and the first fiction ever published by National Geographic. Let's hear from Trudy Truitt, author of Explorer Academy number 4, The Star Dunes.
Hi, Dana. Yes, Trudy Trude is my real name. Kids ask me that all the time, but it is. So here's my book. It's The Star Dunes, and it's the 4th book in the Explorer Academy series. It's the continuing story of a 12-year-old boy named Cruz Coronado and his cast of international friends. And the kids travel around the world exploring and protecting the planet, just like the real explorers do of National Geographic. And one of the perks of writing this series is that, at least up until recently, National Geographic would send me on a book tour with the National Geographic explorers. So I would head out and we would show the kids what it's like to be able to turn your passion for science and nature into an exciting career. So I've had the chance to travel with photographers, a paleontologist, a submarine pilot, a geohealth researcher, even a snake wrangler that collects venom for use in human medications, which was really fun. But it was the geohealth scientist named Jamina Garland Lewis that sparked the idea for the Star Dunes. And Jamina studies zoonotic diseases. And those are diseases that are passed between animals and humans, something we are very much aware of now. But a couple of years ago, when I was writing this book, I was just beginning to learn about. And so while doing the research, I asked Jamina, do we pass diseases to animals? And she said, absolutely, and sometimes with some pretty startling and dire consequences. And she told me about a situation in Africa where banana farms and villages had butted right up against to the preserves, and mountain gorillas were coming down with human diseases like scabies, and they were fatal to them. So I thought this would be a great adventure for the kids to have in Explorer Academy. I also learned that gorillas can come down with a common cold, and for them, it can be a deadly disease. So this is what Cruz does in this storyline, is that he and the explorers travel to Uganda and they help sick mountain gorillas who've come down with a common cold. So here are some of the illustrations in the book. They're kind of cool because what we've done is we've actually taken, some of them are photographs, some of them are straight illustrations, and sometimes the artist will paint on the photograph. So a little something for everybody. They're full color illustrations, and I think they're just absolutely beautiful. There are 3 more books planned for Explorer Academy, so we're gonna have 7 in the series, and it is currently being produced as a Disney TV animated series on Disney+. So I'm looking forward to that, hopefully sometime in the future. And Dana, good news for you, there is a dog in the book.
Yay, yay, and the dog. Do you get to be in the series, on the TV show?
I'm hoping that they're going to ask me to do something. I feel like I should be, maybe an extra in some capacity. That would be so cool.
You are the writer. I'm just saying. Okay. Suzanne Williams is a former elementary school librarian and the author of over 80 books for children. Current ongoing series with co-author John Halou include The Goddess Girls and Thunder Girls, both for ages 8 to 12, and their newest joint venture, Little Goddess Girls for ages 5 through 8. Suzanne Williams, author of Clotho the Fate, Aphrodite and the Gold Apple, Skade and the Enchanted Snow, and Artemis and the Awesome Animals. Suzanne's obviously a slacker, but we'll see if she can talk about her 4 books now. Let's hear from Suzanne Williams.
Actually, I'm just going to talk about one of them in 2 minutes. I picked Scotty and the Enchanted Snow as the one that I'll talk about today. It's the last of 4 books in Joan Holub's and my Norse mythology series, Thunder Girls. And you can buy it not just as a single book, but there's also a 4-book box set. Scotty is the Norse goddess of skiing, and her main myth is one in which she is tasked with choosing a husband by looking just at the legs or the boots, depending on the myth that you read, of a bunch of various gods. Now, she has convinced herself that the god that she likes the best, whose name is Balder, is going to have the most shapely legs. And so she chooses based on that, but she's wrong, unfortunately, and she chooses Njord. He has the most attractive legs or feet, depending on the myth version. And she is a little bit disappointed by this, but Njord tells her she could have done worse. She might have accidentally chosen Loki, who is the trickster god. So there is that. that myth, as well as another myth about the god Balder, become incidents that Joan and I put into our story. And we kind of combine the two things together in our story, so that about 3/4 of the way through, Scotty must choose a boy partner for an aerial ski tricks competition and buy his ski boots. Unwilling to leave things to chance, she does some sleuthing and finds out what Balder's boots look like. But unbeknownst to her, that night, Balder comes down with a very bad case of mistletoe, which is an allusion to the Balder myth, brought on by one of Loki's tricks. And so she chooses wrong again. Fortunately, Njord, who she hasn't liked at the beginning of the story, she has fallen for, at least in a friendly way, by the end of the story.
Thank you. Well done. And mistletoe. I'm going to read this. I'm going to find out more about mistletoe. And sorry about Joan Hollob's name. Moving on, Ben Gooderson was born and raised in Seattle. Before working at Microsoft as a program manager, Ben spent a decade teaching public school on the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico and in rural Colorado. Ben and his family live in the foothills of the Cascades east of Seattle. He is the author of the Winter House series. So take it away, Ben Gooderson, author of the Winter House Mysteries.
Thank you very much. I had this book, The Winter House Mysteries, came out a few months ago. It's the concluding volume in the trilogy, the Winter House trilogy. I never even expected to have one book published, so it was a surprise to even connect with an editor at Macmillan. They asked if I could turn the one book into 3, and that was a real challenge. You know, you could expand one book and drag it out into 3 books. So I decided actually to take the first book and build some things into it that could be developed, you know, in the subsequent volumes. And so that was a real challenge, and also how to make the 3rd book in a trilogy, kind of everything up and be interesting and right. And hopefully the Trials Mysteries did that. I really love wordplay, and there's a lot of wordplay in all the Winter House books. I love, and I try to weave that in. There's a lot of anagrams and word ladders and palindromes. I love anagrams. In Winter House, you see a bunch of them. You know, you can turn the word listen, you can rearrange it into the word silent. You can rearrange astronomers into moon starers. You can rearrange conversation into voices rant on. You can change the countryside into no city dust here. My personal favorite is you can change a decimal point into a dot in place just by rearranging all the letters. My last name, Gooderson, there's only one word in the English language that has 8 letters like my last name. It is a fish. It is sturgeon. I also like palindromes. There's the palindrome, step on no pets, or rats live on no evil star. My personal favorite is go hang salami, I'm a lasagna hog, and you can turn it all the way around. There's lots of wordplay and puzzles in Winter House. Lots of clues are solved by the kids through palindromes, word ladders, and anagrams. So thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who put this wonderful event together.
Thank you, Ben. And Ben, I'd like you to work on the word epistolary. I've heard that twice today. I love epistolary because it sounds like something a middle grader would really get a kick out of, like me. Moving on to, oh, this is a little awkward, but it's me, and I live in Port Townsend with Vicki, Benny, and Matt. You think I wouldn't have to read this, and Max, who pretty much stays in Missouri. I write and illustrate picture books and graphic novels. The second book in my Dead Max comic series, The Rocking Dead, is going to be released in the fall. And I'm now working on book 3, Bully for You. So it's a 4-book series. I teach Intro to Art book illustration for adults and a teen graphic novel class at the Port Townsend School of the Arts. At least I hope we're going to do that. If we don't do it in person, we'll do it virtually. So take it away, Dana, author and illustrator of Dead Max Comics, The Deadening. So here's my book, Dead Max Comics. So spoiler alert, for all those of you who love dogs and hate when they die, he dies. Max dies. He dies right at the beginning, so nobody falls in love with him except his owner, Derek. And that's Derek. Derek, that's Max. I had a real dog named Max. He was a beautiful blue heeler, and he lived a long and happy life, but he eventually died, and he's still here. He's right here. He's with us today, and he sits in my studio, and I've been drawing pictures of him since my son was 10 years old and first got him as a pet. Max, this is Kyle, and that's Max. One of them's a dog and one of them's a child. And he became my dog very quickly. When he did die, I was very sad, and I kept drawing pictures of him, and I drew him as dead Max. And I drew myself as Derek, his owner. Middle school is a tough time, and I really wanted, I wish I had a dead dog, a ghost dog, kind of help me through the trials and tribulations of not just middle school, but my home life. And I really, looking back at some of the teachers that I had, I realized they kind of had my back. They were looking out for me. And I wish I'd known more about that. And I wish I'd talked to them more. So this book is really, really about how our pack is usually bigger than we think it is. We have more people that we can count on than we think. And sometimes the best thing you can do for a bad situation is to draw pictures about it or write stories about it. And it can sometimes help you. A lot of those stories we like to keep secret, but sometimes it's really good when they get public. So big thanks to Red Chair Press for publishing Dead Max Comics. That's it. Great job, Dana. Thank you so much. Thanks. And I love your t-shirt. That's a great t-shirt. Can we see that again? Sure, you bet, Dana. Okay, let's move on to young adult. Now we get into the dirty words. This is the good part, like epistolary. Love that word. Young adult. J. Anderson Coates has received 2 Junior Library Guild Awards, 2 Washington State Book Awards, and earned star reviews from Kirkus, School Library Journal, the Horn Book Review, and Shelf Awareness. Her newest books are Spindle and Dagger, a historical YA set in medieval Wales that deals with power dynamics and complicated relationships, and The Green Children of Woolpit, a creepy middle grade fantasy inspired by real historical events. I can't guarantee she won't use dirty words, but she is J. Anderson Coates, author of Spindle and Dagger. Take it away.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming today. So this is my newest YA book, Spindle and Dagger, which I've been thinking about in one way or another since I was maybe 16 or so, because I was the kind of nerdy teen that had research interests. Books that wander into the world tend to accumulate stories, and at the heart of this one is a real historical event. The 12th century abduction of Nest, who is a Welsh noblewoman whose entire life was routinely complicated by the questionable decisions made by men around her. This story appears in a chronicle where the chronicler really wants us to believe is a love story. Apparently she was abducted because her captor was infatuated with her. But there is a lot of hand-waving over the violence in this story. But what really struck me right from the beginning was how this story was not really Nest's at all. You know, she doesn't get a voice here, and she's pretty much unimportant except for what she represents, which is something valuable to steal. And I started thinking, how different would this story read, would this chronicle read, if Nest and other girls like her got to write down in her own words what happened to her? So what I really want to end on today is this amazing cover. I am really, really fortunate that the folks at Candlewick were able to get Julia Iredale to do the art. There's a lot to love about this cover, but what I think I might love best is the look on Ellen's face, how she is giving side eye to somebody off camera. And I picture her doing this fairly often because she is surrounded by a bunch of guys in a war band who really are rabble rousers, and they're kind of all over the place that way. But even though this book has got some fairly serious, you know, Me Too style issues into it, I picture her giving this face a lot because it's really a book about, you know, complicated relationships. It's about realizing situations that you're in that you've maybe convinced yourself are okay or really just aren't. And you don't have to put up with it. Only changing it's going to be really, really hard. It's a book about inner strength. It's a book about female friendships and confronting unequal power in big and little ways, which is still part of our world today. And really, sometimes you can make a big change, but sometimes really the best you've got is side eye. So thank you all for coming today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Jillian. This is Michele Bacon here with the last prize of the day. We do have one book left, but the winner of the third prize is Jan O'Neill. So Jan O'Neill, thanks for coming today. Go to libertybaybooks.com sometime after 4 o'clock today, and you can order the book that you'd like from all the books that you've heard today. One book that you order will be free, but of course we welcome you to order more. Thanks everyone for coming today, and I will turn it back over to Dana.
Hello, and thank you. Michele, you've been a wonderful book fairy and spotlight fairy. So thank you. And I mean, you've just been epistolary. Kelly Vincent wrangles data weekdays and spends the rest of her time playing with words. She grew up in Oklahoma, but has moved around quite a bit, with Glasgow, Scotland being her favorite stop. She now lives near Seattle with 3 cats who help her write her stories by strategically walking across the keyboard. Her first novel, Finding Frances, is a fine example of this technique. She's working toward a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Oklahoma City University's Red Earth program. Take it away, Kelly Vincent, author of Finding Frances.
Hi, everyone. This is Finding Frances. Finding Frances is really about the aftermath of domestic violence. It deals with the impact of that kind of violence and the many tendrils that infiltrate the lives of family and friends. I've personally never experienced such violence, but I've had many friends who've been victims of abuse. In the mid-90s, I met the first of them, and at that point, the police didn't take it very seriously at all. I worked a night shift at a restaurant with a woman whose ex used to regularly call in and threaten to kill her, and I would send her away in my car on those nights, and it never happened, so that was good. But one night he came in blatantly defying the restraining order she had against him in order to torment her with their baby, who he'd somehow gotten full custody of. We called the police. They came and basically just sent him away, and he didn't get arrested. He didn't even have to pay for his food, and the police patted themselves on the back for a job well done. So my friend constantly worried about her baby because she was afraid that her ex would hurt him in order to hurt her, and having met him, it seemed quite feasible. So although we lost touch, I've always wondered how things turned out for my friend. What if she could have gotten away with the baby and found somewhere safe to be? What would that have looked like, and would it have even worked? So that concern has stayed with me for decades. And a few years ago, I came up with the idea for a story about a woman who tries to escape with her daughter. And I ran with it so I could explore the devastation that domestic violence wreaks and still come up with a way to have a positive ending. So thank you, and I apologize for ending us on kind of a negative note.
That's okay, it's real life. So thank you, Kelly, very much. That concludes our presentations. That's everybody. And I want to thank everyone for showing up. I want to thank all of you people for writing these books and illustrating these books and having them out there. I want a really big thank you to Suzanne Selfors, Liberty Bay Books, for her foresight in buying a bookstore at the best time ever to buy a bookstore. So we really want to support her and every other bookstore on this planet. Real live bookstores are very important to us. And remember, you can order from them just as easily as you can order from Voldemort. I want to thank Laura McGee-Koznovsky for having a fun name to say, and George Shannon, both of them for actually birthing this thing. However many years ago that was, I'm no better at math. 22 years ago. Thank you for doing that. And it has been going strong and such a wonderful thing to look forward to. Okay, thanks for everybody for coming, writing books, reading books, for most of all, for buying books. Here's that website again, libertybaybooks.com. Click on this link. You get these books. You get them sent to you. Maybe you'll get a little dead max in them. No, you won't. You won't. And that is about it. Thank you all. A big round of applause to everybody for coming, for presenting, for being, for reading. Thank you, everybody.
Recording?
Yeah, we should stop now.
Yeah, I'm stopping. Everybody, 3.